Good afternoon. No, not yet. Good morning. Still, we're going to ask our legislative panelists to start making their way to the table. But I will tell you how determined and how committed and how dedicated our elected officials have been. Certainly, as we just heard from our guest from the great state of Illinois. You may not know, because we didn't talk a lot about it, but he was trying to be here last night, despite having to pay 3 tuitions and so forth. I'm not lost on me on that, but also to be able to travel through to get here on time this morning. One of our panelists, State Representative Jordan Harris, victim of the turnpike. He's on his way. Literally had to leave Philadelphia. And I from Philadelphia. Sometimes it takes an hour to get out of Philadelphia to get onto the turnpike. And then there was an accident on the turnpike. He was not involved, but it certainly affected his travel. So when he comes into the room, we will welcome him to the stage. But let us, at least in terms of our conversations, we've got a lot of ground to cover and still want to get folks out on time. And we've got a nice close that we want to share with everyone. So, Tara, I'm going to ask you if you wouldn't mind introducing our other legislators who are here. There's information in the program about their background and one thing that it seems to be a running theme that a lot of our legislators have spent time in the media, which is, I think, a very important perspective because not only do they get it, they understand the lingo behind it, and also understand the reason and rationale for being able to do part of this work. And I think it's, again, very important to do so. So go ahead, Tara.
I'm introducing my guests here.
Yes, yes.
We have Representative Struzzi and Fleming with the State House, and I don't.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
I didn't know I was doing this.
No. Let's not.
I didn't know I was doing this. Sorry.
I mean, you can see it in the program.
You can see it in the program.
Let's get right into
but
it.
both, I should tell you. Both of whom were recommended by a colleague, a former AP colleague of mine who used to cover Harrisburg for the Associated Press and then was the press secretary for PennDOT, and just thought very highly of both these individuals. So they were the ones I jumped
Shout out
on.
Rich Kirkpatrick.
Mm-hmm. Rich Kirkpatrick, yes. Shout out to
He's
Rich.
a real one. Yes, absolutely.
Yes. So we heard. I know that you caught some of it. Not everybody caught the whole thing, but when PNA was giving its presentation, they talked a lot about how we do the job, and their focus being on the ways we can do it better, more transparently. Sad what's happening with some aspects of the right to know law. So, and I appreciate that. I'm wondering if the what right now is just making sure there's media out there. How much of an interest is there on the part of legislators to do something on that, in that area?
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm State Representative Jim Struzzi. I represent the 62nd Legislative District in Indiana County. As was mentioned, I have a degree in English writing. I worked for the Murraysville Star, a weekly newspaper right out of college. I wrote for the Butler Eagle in Butler, Pennsylvania for about 2 years as a daily reporter covering everything from school boards to township meetings to high school football, which was a lot of fun. Yes. And then I went on to work for PennDOT as a community relations coordinator with Rich Kirkpatrick. And then I was the press secretary for PennDOT in District 11, which is the Pittsburgh area. So I've seen all sides of, on the inside being a press secretary, providing information to the media, covering events for the media. And now I am the representative in Indiana County, which only really has 2 media outlets. The Indiana Gazette is our daily newspaper, and we have Renda Media, which is the local radio station. Now, Pittsburgh will cover us, if it's, something that it's big news, something at the courthouse, a trial or something like that. But getting to the original question, having only 2 media outlets the value of those media outlets is tremendously important to the local community, because that's where we find out what happened at the school board meeting, what happened at the supervisors meeting, all the things that you're not going to get from Pittsburgh media, because in Indiana County we get, and depending on where you live, you can get either Johnstown or Altoona TV, but mostly Pittsburgh. And again, they're covering the region, but they're not covering Indiana County specifically. So the local radio station is a valuable resource. They do morning news in the morning. They have a daily show. They cover all the local stuff, and then they go to syndicated stuff throughout the rest of the day with just cut-ins for breaking news and things like that. But that morning segment, I listen to it every day. I actually do a segment on there once a month to give an update about what we're doing here in Harrisburg. But I find that invaluable, both from a news and information standpoint, but also from a political standpoint, because if we don't have those two media resources, they don't know what I'm doing either, right? And they cover a lot of things, and the Gazette's great, but they cover a lot of those things that you're not going to see in the bigger media outlets. Pictures of the kids getting awards, your local little league teams winning a championship, all those types of things I think are valuable resources that we need to make sure we have in our communities. And I think that, ensuring that they have what they need to be successful is fundamentally important to the health of our communities as well. Because, as the one gentleman said, we need to know what's happening. And, when you hear about your friends and neighbors in a small community like that, other than going to social media, which, we talked about that, you guys were talking about, just how much can go wrong with social media because you can't validate your sources. All those types of things. Anybody can put something out there and people see it and thinks that it's factual. Whereas your newspapers and your local radio station, especially in a small town like Indiana, everybody knows everybody. And so they have to do it right. They can't just speculate. They can't quote unnamed sources and things like that. They have to do it right, because we're going to hold them accountable, because they live in our community. We know where the Indiana Gazette offices are. You can walk right in there and talk to the editor. The radio station's right there on the corner. If anybody's been to Indiana County, right on Philadelphia Street across from the Jimmy Stewart Museum, and they have the little ticker that shows the local news. But again, you can see that those two entities are just simply woven into what is Indiana County. So, thank you. I went on and on, but
No,
go
it's
ahead,
important.
Justin.
It's
Thank
important.
you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everybody. I'm Justin Fleming. I represent the 105th Legislative District, and I'm a bit of an anomaly. While my colleagues are from Indiana County and Philadelphia County, respectfully, I'm right here in Dauphin County. I live 15 minutes away from the state capitol. My colleagues hate me. I can sleep in my bed every night. So I don't have an hours-long commute, but to answer the question, I've seen this from a number of different angles, just like Chairman Struzzi. My career aspiration, hey Jan, my career aspiration was to study sports, be a sports broadcaster, or so either be on SportsCenter or be like Lester Holt and anchor the evening news across the country. Clearly that didn't happen because of the nature of the business. Long story, I got married, so I was basically, stayed put here, and I would say it's worked out. But my first job out of college was at Channel 21 on the television side. I was a production assistant and eventually a producer for the morning show. And, I've got my district office director here, Sarah DeSantis, with me. She was a reporter for the news item. And so it's something that we both appreciate. She was on the ground. We actually took a trip yesterday, and we were talking about some of the stories she covered that stay with her, and same with me. For those of you in the area, Red Lion had a terrible school shooting years ago, Red Lion Middle School, and the names and the details are seared in my brain from having worked in the media and covered that. As part of our broadcast. After that, I went to work in the press office at 3 different state agencies with the Rendell administration. And so, just like Chairman, I've had that experience of, sort of being part of the media and also, disseminating information. And interestingly enough, I think we probably overlapped. You were probably at PennDOT at the same time I was with the administration, and I worked at Pima. So that's how I got to know Rich Kirkpatrick, because when we'd have real-world events or even drills, Pima would stand up the Joint Information Center, and we would get all the press secretaries, and I was, as the deputy press secretary at Pima, I was telling them what to do, even though they outranked me. So because we all had to get the information out. The one other thing I want to highlight is I've also seen this from a local government perspective. I was a township commissioner, and when I first started serving as a township commissioner in 2014, we had a reporter covering our meetings. And about 2 years later, that went by the wayside. And so as you talk about, you know, the availability of media and whether or not it's going to be there, I mean, I feel as though the precipitous decline in not only news outlets, reputable news outlets, but the number of people who are working in news is very, very dangerous for our society and our democracy. The next time, for those of you who are local or if you visit Harrisburg, next time you're in the Capitol, I want to give you a little challenge. I think this area is publicly accessible, but if you are in the main rotunda, if you walk up the stairs and you go straight through the hallway, that's the Capitol Media, not the Media Center, but that's where the Capitol Press Corps is. And just look at the pictures. Look at the pictures of how many people comprised the press corps 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, as opposed to now. I mean, it used to be every daily newspaper had a Capitol Bureau reporter, every single one. You know, Butler Eagle, Indiana Gazette, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Tribune Review, and I used to do all the news clips. So I at one time, I knew all of the media outlets, including the weeklies in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, when I did the news clips for Pima. But, you know, the Morning Call, Reading Eagle, you name it, they were all down here. And they had somebody covering the Capitol. Now we have a handful. And that's not to, I mean, the handful of folks we still have doing that, I think on the whole, do a good job of trying to establish relationships with us, trying to get the story. But it's hard when it's, you know, 8 people or 6 people as opposed to the 25 it used to be. And, you know, what gets covered is, you know, when you've got 25 reporters looking for a story, you can cover much more about what we're doing in state government. You can cover a lot of different subject areas. Now it's just, you know, and this, unfortunately, and again, I'm not criticizing them or blaming them, but this contributes to the perception of how divisive we are, because it's only the 102, 101 votes that get covered and the highly controversial things. I mean, Speaker Cutler used to say it all the time. I know Speaker McClinton has said it. I mean, 85% of the bills that we do are largely bipartisan, broad bipartisan support that we pass in the House, but it's those few that get all the attention, and so people think we're hopelessly divided all the time, and that's, you know, that's just not the case. But yeah, I mean, I think it's really dangerous for where we are as a society, like I said, and you know, because you need good public information, you need good reporters who are telling the story about what we're doing in state government. And unfortunately, with the consolidation of media, with the, I mean, my hometown paper, the Patriot News, Penn Live, you know, went down to three days a week for a printed edition several years ago, and I know that, you know, but they made a business decision. It's really, really tough, but I don't think it's good. We're not trending in the right direction, and I you know, I would like to say that the fervor is there for us to act, but I'll be quite honest, it's not high on the priority list when we talk about legislative issues that I'm aware of anyway. I mean, it's probably a better question for our majority leader, but yeah.
I would ask if I could, because even the intentionality of this summit to be held here in Harrisburg was because 2 reasons. One, central part of the state and allow people to come, but even more importantly, we're in the shadow of the Capitol. And we, again, thank you both for being able to be here. And again, Rep. Harris is on his way. But I would love to hear you all talk about what we might be able to do. There's a lot of solutions that have come out of this summit. Not to call out anybody in particular, but there are some news outlets that aren't here, not just to cover it, but to be involved in the conversation about how to turn some of those things around. So, Chair Struzzi or Rep. Fleming, however you'd like to talk, because I think, Rep. Fleming, you hit the nail on the head that there's energy around it, but not a high priority for it, and how might, and not that we're asking for our legislators to help us solve this, but we're certainly hoping that we can engage our legislators to be part of how we collectively as a Commonwealth can make this situation better than it is.
Well, I would say, first of all, how many of you have been to the Capitol? Okay, if you haven't been and you're here, go over and get a tour. I mean, you have to see it for yourself because it is simply a spectacular building. And we are truly honored and blessed to be able to work there. I think one of the main things that you can do, and Jan was just in my office a few weeks ago, is share your concerns, share your thoughts, share your ideas with us, your local legislators. Bring them in and let them see what you're doing in your respective media areas. Let them know your challenges, let them know what you're facing, and then work together on what you think might be solutions. We get inundated with a plethora of different problems from all different aspects of life. And I think the best thing that people who are in the know, in the trenches, can do is work with us to craft solutions. Because, I can't tell a contractor how to build a house or legislate around that, but we can work with them to craft legislation that maybe helps them navigate some of the regulatory issues that they have to face or things like that. So I think it's important that you have conversations, that you come in with some possible solutions and share with us what you might think is something that could help solve some of the problems. And then, at least I can speak for myself, and I know Justin and I think very much alike, is that we want our doors to be open to our constituents, to our the people that pay the bills in this Commonwealth, the taxpayers, the businesses that contribute. And that includes, obviously, all of the media in our respective districts. So if you have ideas, if you have thoughts, come in and share them with us.
Yeah, I want to echo that point, and it's my second shout out to Jan. I've known Jan Murphy for a long, long time. And no one's better qualified to speak on this probably than Jan, with her time as a reporter and now with the News Media Association. I will say, when we talk about solutions, it's a big problem to solve, but I will say, some of the things that we've kicked around for years that we could do a better job of, and I've seen this from multiple perspectives, things like right to know. We could certainly be more transparent. I'll give you a brief example. So by May, we all have to file our financial disclosures, our personal financial disclosures. And, I serve on a volunteer board, and the cost for reimbursement and things like that for my service was around $8,000. And, Steve Caruso and I with Spotlight just had a conversation about it, because on the paper, it just looks like, okay, some nebulous organization, which I named, but is just giving you $8,000. And so it was really for my board service. But I appreciated Steve grabbing me in the rotunda, asking me questions about it, rather than just going out with some headline that, Rep. Fleming's on the take, some organization is funneling him thousands of dollars, and that's the way it ought to be. So I give kudos to Steve for that. And that's the reason why the financial disclosure is there. That's a perfect encapsulation of why that is a requirement and why I support it as a requirement. Because our constituents deserve to know, sort of what our sources of funding are and things like that personally. And, and those other activities, is someone paying you for trips? Are you getting gifts and, that are above the threshold and things like that? So that's really good. In terms of right to know, I've followed this for quite a while, and I think, more transparency is never a bad thing. I mean, as Chairman Struzzi said, for me, I'm an open book. you ask me a question about, something I support, and I'll give you a straight answer. And we want to be as accessible as we possibly can to our constituents. And quite frankly, that's what they deserve. They deserve to know those things, about how we vote. And we deserve to give them an explanation about why we vote a certain way and things like that. So I am always in favor of more transparency because I've been on the other side. Oh, I forgot to mention I was also a lobbyist for 12 years. So I was a mental health and child advocate. So before I got elected to the General Assembly. So again, just being around the building and seeing it from all sides, and following the right to know fights and things like that. The other thing, when we talk about transparency, and I know this is a hot button issue, but with meeting notices and things like that, and how we effectuate that so the public has notice, but that's one of the issues that we have is because of our dwindling sources of media, public notices are imperiled. Because fewer people read the newspaper, they may not see the public notices. We have Penn Live here, and the Hummelstown Sun is our sort of papers of record in South Central Pennsylvania. And if there's going to be a big land development meeting, people deserve to know that. People in that community deserve to know that. But I think there is a solution. I would like to see, an expansion of something like just one sort of online resource that we can point people to. You drop down menu, hey, and then the public notices just stay there, and they stay up. So there's a record of what's been happening. That's what I would like to see, but it's an issue I know that we'll work through, and I'm always willing to work through. So those are two things that we can absolutely improve. And just to echo what Chairman Struzzi said, we certainly don't corner the market on solutions, and we don't know a lot of things, quite frankly, unless we're told that they're problematic or that we're told there's an issue. And it doesn't take, you'd be surprised, if 5 or 6 people are contacting my office about the same thing, that gets my attention. I don't need 1,000 emails, 5 or 6 people, illuminating the same thing. I'm like, okay, we need a meeting about this. Let's figure out how we can, help these folks, so.
Senator Stottlemans, in his talk, talked about a task force that they created in Illinois and met for 6 months to look at policy solutions, and with the realization they're not all legislatively driven, but those that can be. Is there some way that can happen in Pennsylvania? We have a lot of very interested people here who would probably be happy to serve on some kind of a task force that looks into things like that for ways to kind of beef up the industry, the news industry in Pennsylvania. Would that be, I would just say, I'll put my hand up if you want someone to help. And I'm sure several people here would, just to look into some of the solutions.
I think that could absolutely happen, and I thank the senator for being here from Illinois. I was able to watch your presentation, so I appreciate your perspective and the efforts that you tried to take. I think here in Pennsylvania, I don't know how much of that's going to stick here in PA, but I think it's worth having the discussion. As far as forming a task force, that's absolutely possible. I think bringing some people in and having a hearing, having a policy hearing, going before whatever respective committee would tackle these issues is a possibility. I think just having the discussion, having this forum here this week is a step in the right direction. I would go back to what we said earlier, and that is, we need to be aware of what the actual issues are. I'd love to see a map like the senator had showing what Pennsylvania's media outlets look like. I think that would be helpful. Look for those zones where you don't have media, right? Do you have that?
Oh, is he the
yeah.
guy?
I would like to see that. Yeah.
Yes.
Right. So, yeah,
I'll give him your email addresses.
Yeah, I think, forming a task force is one thing. I think it's important to hear from everyone in a more formal setting. We can form a task force. You guys probably already do something like that. I would think, within your organization to look at what you think might be solutions. But I think we'd absolutely be open to having a policy hearing, having a committee hearing, to hear from different media outlets from around the Commonwealth. And we're not just talking print media, we're talking, radio and television and, all of the above. So I don't know, I can't speak for Representative Fleming, but I would certainly be open to that.
Unsurprisingly, it's something that I'd absolutely look into, and I'd love to participate. That would probably be our Communications and Technology Committee, if off the top of my head. I'm not a member of that committee, but if we did form a task force, given the experiences that I have, and I know you alluded to this, Tara, in the beginning, but I just want to say I think I'll speak for myself. I mean, media and news, keeping the public informed, especially about what your leaders are doing, is absolutely critical work. And it is indispensable work. And so I just want to make that really clear that that's my thought on this matter. And so anything we can do to enhance the environment, anything we can do to help make the media environment more robust, again, with trusted sources. And here's the thing, I imagine, I don't have data to support this, but I imagine the way people feel about media is a lot like they feel about, Congress, right? If you ask somebody about Congress writ large, yeah, no thanks, approval ratings in the tank. But if you ask the media about their member, or if you ask people about their member, oh, that's my guy. So it's like the media as a whole may be terrible, but I like my paper. I like my reporters. You know what I mean? So I'd imagine there's a similar sentiment, and I think anything we could do to, whether it's a task force, anything we could do like Illinois has done. Thank you again, Senator, for your great work. To try and improve, in my work, I talked a lot about childcare deserts where, there isn't a lot of childcare availability around. Media deserts are really bad too, where folks don't have a trusted source to get their information from. That's really dangerous.
And even though his map may show that there is an outlet here or there, that doesn't mean it's that viable.
Right.
I mean, again, when I was at the AP in the 80s and 90s, there were 10 people in the Pittsburgh Bureau alone.
Yes.
Now there's a photographer and a sports writer, because we always have to have sports. So
I mean, it's fun. Like the chairman said, sports are fun. So,
but you have a Tree of Life shooting and they get shipped from Philly. That is not, and that's the Associated Press. That's a wire service.
Right.
It's supposed to feed all the newspapers in the country. And broadcast outlets. So it is just saying that something exists doesn't mean it really exists. So,
if I could, just to yes, absolutely, and welcome Representative Jordan Harris. And again, we've prior to your arrival, regaled the tales of being stuck on the turnpike. And so one thing I do know about Rep. Harris in terms of his commitment, he was at a breakfast this morning in Philadelphia, and was committed to being here. So just to catch you up, not only
I was listening in the car.
Wow,
right.
Technology, media, right? All right, see?
there you go.
So you know where we are, and we know what you're talking about. We're trying to actionable items that we could do together, not just relying on our legislators and the legislature to do these things, but how might we work together in terms of being able to move some of this agenda forward.
were you listening through PCN?
I was listening through the text message my communications director sent.
All right.
So yes, it is PCN.
All right.
That was, yes. So
Shouts out to PCN.
Yeah.
So first of all, I don't have a media background like these two gentlemen. The only connection I have is that in college, my roommate my freshman year at Millersville was Andrew Frederick, and he was the editor of The Snapper, which
Yes,
is the
sir.
Millersville paper.
Yes, sir.
So we talked about the media all the time. And he was an English major, so he reviewed all of my English papers before I
There you
handed it
go.
in. Only reason why I made it, never mind. None of that. We're on TV. Anyway, shout out to Andy. Here's what I'll say. I think we had to change, in my view, how we view each other. I think a lot of times people think you have to have an adversarial relationship with the media. Now, look, I have a job to do just like the media has a job to do. But that doesn't mean that our jobs are adversarial. And I think a lot of times, I feel like when you get elected, some electeds come to the table thinking like that. And that doesn't have to be the case. And so I think us changing how we view each other is important. I think how, on the other side, how things are reported is also important. Kind of what Representative Fleming was saying. I mean, as a whole, people have a negative view of elected officials until you talk about the elected official that they know, and then, you know, they're great. And so I think it's important that we collectively begin to change how the media is viewed, but also how elected officials are viewed. Because I think that it erodes the confidence that people have in their government. And, you know, we both need each other with regards to what we're doing, but also how what we're doing is communicated to people. You know, a lot of times you read an article and it's like people are looking for the nefarious nature in all of the actions. And I got to tell you, I go to work with 203 people who the overwhelming majority of them mean well. We may disagree politically. We may have a different view on how to do things. But most of the people that I serve with are just good people who come from a different place with a different background and a different viewpoint on what we're doing. And so I think collectively we can work to change how each other is seen in this space. And I think that helps with people with regards to how they're going to engage with their government through what they see in the media. I think the second thing that I think is going to be helpful is a resurgence in the media in our classrooms. There's far too many of our young people who are growing up thinking the only way to get information is from TMZ or some social media outlet. Now, there's no knock to TMZ. I mean, they're actually good at getting stories. If I'm being honest, sometimes I'll see something on Facebook. I'm like, did TMZ say it? Because if TMZ ain't say it, it ain't real. And I had to check myself because, I mean, you know, a lot of times it's these outlets that a lot of everyday average people are getting. I mean, but when I was growing up, my grandmother in Philly, she watched Channel 6. There was no other, I mean, there were other ones, but there was no other one that mattered. She was going to listen to what Jim Gardner said, and if Jim Gardner didn't say it, it ain't true. And then Jim Gardner would sit there and he would tell you there was no inflection in his voice. There was like, this is just what it is. And I think we got to get back into our schools to, you know, a lot of our children don't know what a primary source or secondary source is, so they pick up their phone and they see it. Just because a person has 100,000 followers doesn't mean what they're reporting is real, right? And so for the lifeblood of professional journalism, but also for our democracy, we need to get, in my view, back into our classrooms and introducing our young people to media at a younger age and letting them know what are reliable sources and who they should be looking for. And that's why the diversity in media is important too. Black media is important. Hispanic media is important. You know, media in our rural areas, all of those kind of things are also important.
That's another bill we could have you look at, is requiring media literacy in grammar school. But that's for another day, but that would be.
I'm sure Jan Murphy will be in my office one day
Yeah.
talking about it, wherever Jan is. I know she's here somewhere.
Yep.
Okay.
So is there any, I know we're kind of pressed for time. So if we said that maybe out of this event, we're going to have this yearly, whether they come or not, we will build it. So if we say that we would like to look into creating a group that would consider some of the suggestions made in the past 2 days, because there have been many, and you can't digest them all, to see whether there's kind of a interest on the part of the legislator to consider some of these suggestions. Would you be in favor of that? Those two guys said they would.
Oh, you were asking me?
I'm asking you because you just walked in. And you're,
yeah.
and you're a big cheese, so it's important what
I'm
you
just a
think.
guy from South Philly.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, look, and I think I said this in the meeting that I had. I'm open to looking at what we can do better. You know, I know you guys talked a little bit about transparency and whatnot. But transparency also shouldn't be abusive. And I think we also have to recognize that we're in a political climate where, you know, every 2 years we run for office, we have petitions. My home address is on that petition. People knock on my door. You know what I mean? And, you know, while 15 years, 14 years ago almost, when I first got elected, that was okay. Nowadays, you never know why somebody is showing up to your house. And, you know, there have been people, elected officials, who have been harmed. And so, and judges. So I have also a responsibility to protect my home and myself. And, you know, it's crazy when you're having lunch somewhere and then on Twitter, somebody is talking about where you had lunch and what you were eating. Like, that's wild. Yes, it's happened to me before. So I think we have to make sure that transparency is available. We also have to be responsible with that transparency so it can't be weaponized. So, you know, a small municipality isn't getting, 10,000 requests for something, that is, one, costing the taxpayers resources and just something that's not really in the interest of the public. So I think there's man. So there has to be a balancing act.
Right.
For me, am I willing to sit at the table and discuss what those things look like? Absolutely. Because I think it is valuable that people know what's going on and know what's going on with their government.
I'm not sure, because I'm just looking at time, because I know that there was a lot of folks we had, and we started even our summit saying how valuable fellowship and conversation was around tables and things of that nature. And there was a lot of conversation about the having legislators in attendance here. So I'm not sure if we have time for questions. And I also don't, I know it's Friday, and I know that some of our legislators have come a distance, some just 15 minutes away, Rep. Fleming, thank you very much, but would be here. So I'm kind of looking at my partner, Pam, to see if we have time for questions from the audience, because I'm sure there may be some. Can we? Yeah, okay, thank you, Natalie.
We have the room all day.
Well, yeah, right, but
Paid for the whole day.
right, but again, want to be respectful of your time. Yeah, go ahead.
First of all, I want to thank all three of you gentlemen for taking time out of your schedule to meet with us. But I think it was Representative Harris that identified some of your colleagues have adversarial relations with the media. What if, based on the earlier suggestions, we come to our representatives to voice our concerns if we're represented by one of those adversarial lawmakers that one have no part with the media because they don't trust them or whatever the case might be? How would you recommend us voicing our concerns to our state legislature?
If I can just quickly repeat the question for the broadcast, how might we, as folks who will be coming to some of our elected officials, who might be those folks who are on the adversarial side, how might we approach that so it can be a productive conversation? And that's for anyone on the panel.
Well, here, I'll start, honestly. So after I got elected, I'm the new kid on the block, so I just got elected in 2022 and reelected in 2024. I made it a point to go see all of the news directors of the broadcast stations. Of course, I knew Jan, who was covering the Capitol with Charlie Thompson for a long, long time. So I had those relationships, but I would recommend to any media members, regardless of party, if someone new gets elected, take the time to go meet with their office. Just sit down one-on-one. The conversation's off the record. Just get to know one another as people. And of course, if they want to do something on the record, that's totally fine too. But I would say, I used to tell when I was a lobbyist, like I said, I would tell, I lobbied for social workers, psychologists, and kids. But I would tell social work and psychology students, like, go meet your representative. Go talk to them. We are people, just like everybody. We are doing a job that puts us is a very public-facing position, but we're human beings. Just talk to us, reach out to us, and just try and build that relationship. It's always harder from a policy perspective. It's always harder to say no to somebody that you know well, and sometimes you have to, than it is to a complete stranger. So if just take some time to build a relationship, I think that would be the number one thing.
So what I would say.
I agree with Representative Fleming. I think when our new members get elected, I think it's important for folks to go and have conversation, particularly off-the-record conversation, just to introduce. I think the other thing is to realize that all elected officials, even the ones who have an adversarial relationship, want to use the media. And in a sense that they have a press conference, they want you to cover it. There's no reason to have a press conference
Without press.
if you don't want press. So every elected official, when they have press conferences, they want you to be there. So, I think there's always going to be an opportunity to interface with elected officials because they're, at some point in time, they're going to want to interface with you. They're going to send you stuff. And quite honestly, if you're having an issue with the adversarial one, when they're having events that you can get to, go. I mean, honestly, to Justin's point, we're literally all just people. And I do believe that, a lot of times when you get beyond the titles and just deal with people as people, I think, things go better. Now, that's not to say that you're not going to still do a story when it's necessary. And I think people understand that, and you should have that real conversation. But I do believe that every elected official is going to want to interface with you at some point in time to talk about something that's important to them. And that's the other thing, find out what is important to them. And maybe that's how you start the conversation about what those things are. Because look, it doesn't, I can tell you, if I'm talking about, social work, stuff like that, if I want to talk about coal, I know Jim is going to talk to me about coal for 3 hours if I let him. He is going to talk about Indiana County and coal. It's going to happen. So if I want to talk to Jim, I should probably start off talking about coal. Am I right? Come on,
Absolutely
Jim.
right. Do you want to talk about it now?
No,
You said
Jim, we don't have to talk about coal today. Give him the room all day. I want to talk about
Like 2 minutes versus anthracite, I mean.
If I could just echo what both gentlemen have said, I think relationships are fundamentally important. And I think, back to my days, I go back to when I was a press secretary for PennDOT. I built really good relationships with the news media in Pittsburgh. And it got to the point where they weren't trying to get me. We had a good enough relationship where if I was doing an interview and I said something wrong, they weren't looking for that gotcha moment. I'd be like, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to say it that way. Can we, And I think that, that respect allowed me to be more open with the reporters, knowing that, they weren't going to try to get me. And I think that's part of the problem that we have with the media today, not all media, but some media, is they're lacking that integrity. They're lacking that, willingness to just cover the story, not looking to nail someone. And so I think when some of our colleagues have that adversarial relationship or that attitude or that opinion of the media, it stems from some of those kind of things. But I would echo what Chairman Harris said. It's important to get out there, cover something soft, something easy, that you can start to build that trust, to build that relationship. And so they know when you call them up, you're not looking for that gotcha moment. You're just looking for the information on a factual basis to cover the story.
Question, if there is one. I saw a few hands before when we asked for some, and if not, that's okay. Oh, Denise?
What's the thing that Representative Harrison and Fleming called you about that they want to talk to you all about?
Maybe this thing called the budget. Might be working on a little bit.
Fair enough.
There will be conversations.
Well, we are all three on the Appropriations Committee, so we dig very deeply into the state budget, and that is a lot of the conversations that we have revolve around that. But, we have to build relationships with each other too, I will talk about that sports team from Philadelphia if I have to, but
Wait, are we talking about the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles? I mean, what are we talking, like, the current champions? Okay, that's all.
He just
right. I'm not
I didn't say that. I
talk
won't
about the
say that.
Pirates either.
he just nudged the door open. You had to kick it down.
I'm
Chairman.
just saying, if you want to talk about the Eagles, we can do that.
Yeah,
And we all agree. Again, sports is fun.
Yeah,
Sports is fun.
but we have to all get along too, and having those personal relationships makes a difference in every career path in all walks of life. So,
Chairman, when were you first elected?
I ran in 18, elected in 19.
Okay, so I was with the Pennsylvania Psychological Association then. So, or I'm sorry, I was with Pennsylvania Partnerships for Children then. So I had my first new member meeting with Chairman Struzzi, and it's still, I don't know if it's still in your office, but there's a picture of he and his entire family in the parade in Indiana County. And, so that image is still embedded. So every time I see, how's the family? And 5 children?
4.
4, okay.
Yes.
I knew it was more than me.
It's still there.
I have more Jim Struzzi stories if anybody wants to talk to me. He knows what I'm talking about, too. And
I think we're out of time.
Okay.
But I do want to thank Chair Struzzi, Rep. Fleming, and Chair Harris for their time this morning, and thank you very much for your attention.